Harper and I are going Christmas shopping for her parents. Can't keep up.
All the holidays.
Can you hear me on the computer?
Yeah, I can hear very well.
Absolutely.
This is the online streaming, and this is the videotaping.
Let's wait, 10, what time is it?
So, well, 2 minutes, 1 minute to 6.
Well, how about if we wait till 6:10?
Absolutely
Are you
okay,
okay
with
with
me.
that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we
Yes.
should.
I know what two people showing up.
There will be at least 10 more who are coming.
How is it to park around here? That's the other thing that's always made me think.
I just parked in front of the street.
We were
really?
got right from the street, but usually it's a nightmare. Like last week, I had to drive around the corner.
I had no trouble at all.
But yeah, it lends a lot of like, I should get there 10 minutes early.
Right, exactly.
But,
You're with me, Maureen. Let's get there.
oh, where's my script?
Where's your script? You want your script? How about your glasses? Oh, what did I just do?
That was a pleasure.
Here's your script. And mine. I don't really need my glasses. We practiced. Anastasia knew all the history. And she's amazing.
Oh, wow.
It's just
No, no details.
When did she's from Russia, yeah?
Belarus.
Oh, Belarus, okay.
But Russian's her language.
USSR.
Right. And she grew up, well, she done
No, she's 35. No, she didn't really. I never did, but I guess she did.
I know these people.
Thanks.
So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
made it.
You made it just in time.
No, yeah, right.
I can't, I was freaking out, couldn't do it.
I know.
Just to let you know, there's Dama, there's Prosecco, and there's pierogies.
Oh my goodness, that's
Before you
fantastic.
sit down, you might want to think about it.
Great. How come they're in the front and just in the back?
I like to see his voice and I would do.
Nice to see you.
Well, maybe you two come in first.
I have.
It was there.
Oh, the party.
I remember.
I know.
Everybody wrote from the bridge, stuck on the bridge, so. So I think we should award the people who get here on time, right? I mean, it's really not fair.
Nice to see you, sir. My name, this is my son Mario.
Hi. Pleasure.
Galen's house.
You want this chair or this chair?
I feel like I'm in somebody's living room. Is this your store, Pat? This is so intimate.
Did you hear what kind of answer? She says she feels like she's in someone's
No
living
comment.
room.
I don't.
We're just thinking about getting rid of some of our books.
We've gotten rid of almost all of them.
Your
Yeah.
book?
We just have like the one bookshelf in our living room.
I'm not gonna take my book home.
I tell you, it's a difficult process.
We have like 7 bookcases filled with books.
But if you, I mean, if there are books that you actually do reread,
No,
well, then that's,
no. But
I've heard of that guy.
oh, that'd be great. I think she'd really like it as the cute.
Not feel like alphabet.
Right?
Yeah, right.
I know that.
So is that one, the one you got, the headphone, that works really well? Our friend Richard is supposed to show up, we'll see.
Basically, this was my
Richard,
excuse to
as
get
in
it.
Richard.
As in Richard, he said
As
he
in
was
Richard
coming, we'll see
Adler?
if he actually shows
I
up.
didn't even know he was in town.
Wait, he's coming?
He said he was, but I don't see him, do you see him? I don't see him.
I'm not sure.
Candy will be better if the candles got over there.
Jane and Nan are on the bridge. Adrian, 4 people are, Adrian, Mike, Deb, and George are also on the bridge. So, stupid people, I don't know what they're thinking. Just, we'll give them, what time is it?
6:04.
Huh?
It's 6:10, we're starting.
Maybe the bedroom.
6:15. Well, it's, it's not fair. These people,
Well,
unless they want to
some
drink and
people-
eat.
Yeah, they don't have, you don't know them and they're.
By the way, if anybody has to grow,
I mean, I know they're coming because they drove to, they're in the, they're in the queue.
Oh,
we all have to go
What?
together.
Oh, no, I'm at Katie's car.
Do you?
What I'm going in,
But I can drive.
Okay.
depends on what's he,
I can drive.
oh, yeah, Joe can drive. Yeah, we have 2 extra
five.
seats. We can, or 3.
Yeah.
We can get 3 there.
Much appreciated.
We're more fun than them, you should go.
You
I'll
can,
take
you almost
whatever
ended
I
up
can
with
get.
Nan and Jane, and I worked that out.
Oh, they're.
How's your perfect,
What?
or whatever you call it? You all done with those?
Oh my goodness. No, what?
Jane said that they were before- Adrian said they would get here to
Actually, I'm almost all done except for like 3. Like they're just not, the last 3. But I, no, I did the hardest team. Like, which is just so much more documentation for. So I finished that with that one. The rest of them, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, get on Monday. You'll like it.
I just want to be respectful of people. This woman has to leave. It's your thing. You get to say. Aren't those good little guys?
Yeah, all right. Where'd you get these?
They're pierogies.
I know, but where'd you get them?
Up the street at Cinderella Bakery.
Hey, Joe, grab me one.
Okay, there's mushroom in there.
What is that?
You're putting on one food drink.
Potato, you had the potato and mushroom. I really like the kids in those pajamas.
They were very cute.
What's with your sons? They're hilarious. They're 18 years old and they look so happy. They had Hanukkah pajamas on. They're so cute. And socks. And they look really, really happy. At least it was a step up from the bunny
We're
suit.
gonna wait for 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes? What is
Well,
the
he's-
road report?
He's in charge.
Everything starts with you.
Everything starts 15 minutes late, he said. What time is it?
6:05.
6:05.
That's right.
It's quite unfair that they're here, but I'm gonna have another pierogi, so they're. Maybe I should pass them around. You help me with this. And there's
Cello.
Came up, I put it in the freezer.
This was, yeah.
You said last time there was too much alcohol. And keep on adding alcohol and it keeps on freezing.
Она иногда выключается. Вы садитесь вместе с Аделькой? Да?
I mean, normally the limoncello can go in the freezer, right?
Yeah.
He's so bummed because he made the limoncello, he got all it, bottled his bottles, he individually bottles them, and he's like, bought this like shrink wrap stuff, so it looks so professional, and Rowan's making the labels, and then he put it in the, it didn't blow out because I'm sure it wasn't air gap in there, but it froze, and so then he's like, crap,
I think it should freeze. But that's where-
I wonder if our fridge is just cold. I don't know, I'm sure ice cream's okay. So now, yeah, he keeps every night he has more vodka.
I'm afraid not that. Really fun.
Right,
Anyway, you get what you get. So it's,
don't put it in the freezer unless you want a limoncello slushy.
Да. Мне кажется, мне кто-то хочет, чтобы... Пив, могу предложить вам какой-нибудь лимонад? Окей. Еще 5 минут и будем начинать. It was just any refreshments for you.
Oh, I
Пирожки.
yeah.
Honey, these people didn't plan well. What can I tell
All right,
you?
let's start.
We're gonna start now. It's only 6:10. You're gonna go? No, I can't find my glasses. Okay. No, those are good. 1 second, we can start. Leave it out, my glasses.
You're right, it's not very thin.
Anyway, okay, I can leave it without. Okay.
As it turns out, yeah, it is.
we have to-
Sure, Patrick, I'll do this little introduction and we'll...
Sure, great.
Good evening. Welcome to the Globus Bookstore. We are an independent bookseller providing our multilingual communities with books in their native languages since 1971. Thank you for joining us tonight for discussion and reading of a new novel by Patric Coffey, Live Not by Lies. Before we begin, I would start to touch on some basics and kindly ask to please silence your phones. Thank you.
Never mind.
Thank you. As you may notice, Patrick is using some kind of a device to make his voice louder, so keep this in mind as well. We are live streaming this event on our YouTube channel, Globus Books. This video is available for viewing. You can share it with your friends. Please leave a comment, like it. That's how we can help other people to learn about new exciting books and projects that we present here at the store. We will have a dedicated Q&A section where you'll be able to ask your question or vocalize your comment. I would kindly ask to raise your hand prior so we can keep this process organized as well. We have a number of copies of Live Not by Lies tonight available. Feel free to sign it with Patrick afterwards. And of course, all of the refreshments are available before, prior, and after the event. Feel free to treat yourself with bites and beverages. So tonight, we are going to read from and discuss a novel, Live Not by Lies. This is a historically inspired book based on some of the real events and tells us the story of two families. One of the family is a real family, meaning that it has names of real historical figures, such as Leonid Eitingon, a spy, an activity agent, and the person behind assassinations for the Soviet government, including the murder of Trotsky and many others. His stepdaughter, Zoya Zarubina, she is a spy. She was a spy herself. She was an interpreter for the Soviet delegation and Tehran Conference and Yalta Conference. She was the person behind the translation of so-called Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb secrets brought in from the West. She also was a professional athlete and human rights activist as well. There's, in fact, there are a lot of other big names, important names for the Soviet history in this book, in this novel, such as Stalin, Kamenev, Zinoviev, Trotsky, even Akhmatova and Babel. There's a fictional family that could be easily be a real one, knowing the history of the Soviet Union, and it's a family of a white army general who at some point in his life connects with Eitingon, and the novel will see how that connection influenced the life of every family member. Hi there. Welcome in. Please find yourself a seat.
Oh, I was just wondering about you. There you are. Nice that you came.
Yeah, I found this book a very compact encyclopedia of history of the Soviet Union, because the events being covered by this book start right before the revolution and the assassination of the last Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, and ends with the collapse of Soviet Union. I find it very dynamically written, and I think it would be an exciting read. Also, it has a lot of details on the day-to-day life of the Soviet people, and I'm pretty sure that it would be a joyful read for those who's interested in the history of the Soviet Union. I'm extremely humbled and excited to welcome Patric to the Globus Bookstore tonight. Thank you for choosing us as a platform for your new book presentation. Thank you. Patric, all his professional life, been designing tools for research in chemistry, and at some point he came up with a book, Cathedrals of Science, which is a nonfiction book and a research on the factors that were shaping chemical industry. A very highly acclaimed book by the professionals. And tonight we are presenting the results of his 10 years work on the subject of the Soviet history. And Patric, thank you so much. And please, let's go ahead and do some reading, and then we'll continue with Q&A.
Thank you very much for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming this evening. I'm Patric Coffey, and this is my wife, Leonid Coffey, who's also my editor. I began this book about 10 years ago after a two-week business trip in 1978, which had fascinated me. Polish Pope was elected while I was there, and all that news was blocked. You couldn't read it, couldn't hear it on the Soviet radio. The police knew nothing what was happening in the greater world unless it was permitted to. Then when I came to Cal, Yuri Siskin welcomed me. If any of you have ever attended Yuri's lectures, they're fascinating. You'll see his influences in this book, but in yours are mine. Whenever I'm asked what the novel is about, my answer is, it's about lies. Lies are necessary for any anti-democratic government. Goebbels called it the big lie. Repeat a lie often enough and loudly enough, people begin to accept it as true. History can be revised at will, Orwell said. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And in 1984. But also in the Soviet Union, it happened every day. This book documents it well. They take every photo. If you were executed, you'd be removed. Librarians spend all their time with Indian ink and razor blades. Live Not by Lies borrows its title from an essay that Solzhynitsyn released on the day he was expelled from the Soviet Union. The foundation underlying communism, he wrote, was lies. Those who denied those lies have been imprisoned, executed, shot, sent to slave labor camps, starved to death and drugged in psychiatric hospitals. Solzhynitsyn knew that most would not have the courage to follow the distant path. But he encouraged his fellow citizens not to believe the lies, not to repeat them, not to teach them to their children. There would be cost even to that. A missed promotion, a university admission denied, a bad apartment. But those lies were soul killing, and you had to pay a certain price just to be human. We are not called upon to step out of the square and shout out the truth. He said, that's too scary. We're not called upon to say what we do not say what we think. We're not ready for that. But at least let us refuse not to say what we do not think. Refuse that. Don't get up and repeat that. When the Tsar's government collapsed in 1917, when the Bolsheviks seized their chance. Lenin's version of Marxism was supposedly scientific. There was no empirical evidence behind it. It was supposed to lead to the brotherhood of man and to the elimination of poverty. In fact, the economic system was so top down that it managed to produce after World War II a nation of poor Germans. It's been very hard to do. Every ordinary citizen knew they were fed a daily diet of lies, and many had experienced it through their families. Lived Out by Lies is a novel. It's a story of two families. And as Anastasia said, it begins and ends with the musings of Zoya Zarubina, 70 years old, on December 25th, 1991, which was the last day. Then it dissolved into Russia and the other Soviet republics. Zoya is the book's narrator and an historical character. She translated the secrets stolen from the Manhattan Project. The lies are everywhere in the book. Zoya's father, Vasily Zarubin, was a secret police agent of the Cheka, the predecessor of the KGB, working undercover as a diplomat in Harbin, China, where 200,000 refugees from the Russian Civil War had immigrated. They're now living, and many of them wanted to go. The first lie from Zoya's father.
I'll actually read from the book. On other nights, Zoya says, after my father sang a lullaby, and this is just his note, Anastasia read this book really closely, and this is probably the only major mistake Pat had in the book. The lullaby that he mentioned was from 1964. It was the wrong lullaby, so he will have to make that correction. Anyway, she was talking about a different,
That's the advantage of books on demand.
different lullaby. And Zoya says that her father said he must go to Moscow, that my mother and I would stay in Harbin for a short time and then follow. I tried to climb into his lap, but he gently pushed me back under the duvet. He said that the party needed him, and there was no arguing with the party. But what about helping people get home, I asked. Others will help him, he said. I'll be gone when you wake up, but we'll be together soon. I didn't see him for 2 years. And by that time, Mama was with Leonid. When I asked Papa what he did for work, he told me that thousands of Russians had fled to Harbin during the Civil War, and it was his job to help them go home. That was one way of looking at it, a version suitable for a small child. Many white Russian refugees in Harbin were now destitute. They had run through their money, sold their jewelry and paintings. They were homesick, and my father offered passports and train passage to return to Russia. All was forgiven, he said. I have since learned this much. In Russia, nothing is ever forgiven. He indeed sent whites home, where some, especially army officers, political leaders, were either imprisoned or shot immediately. Others might be offered a choice, a prison or a return to exile in one of the whites' communities in Paris, Berlin, Vienna, Istanbul, Shanghai, San Francisco, or New York. Then the Cheka would pay them a miserable stipend, and they would live as Judas goats, accepting any task the Cheka assigned them.
So Leonid Eitingon was Zerubin's replacement, both as a resident in Harbin and in Zoya's mother's bed. They became lovers and soon married. Leonid is another historical character. His crowning achievement was managing the murder of Leon Trotsky. Excuse me.
Drink some water. Or just drink some Prosecco.
In Mexico in 1940. When Ramon Mercader, his chosen assassin, found an ice axe in Trotsky's brain. That's history. Can you read from me?
Sure. Back to fiction. 80-year-old Leonid feels death approaching, and he wants to tell Zoya the secrets he has left behind. He tells her that he was Trotsky's aide in the Civil War when Trotsky ran the Red Army from his armored train, that he was one of the soldiers who executed Tsar Nicholas and his family, that he flew the score of Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony into besieged and starving Leningrad for its premiere. Zoya is never sure how much of this is true.
The second family in my story, the Eitingons, are fictional. Boris Eitingon was a white colonel in the Civil War. He's now a doorman at a luxury hotel in Harbin. Living with his wife Anna, his mother Lydia, and his daughter Irina. Zoya's best friend is Irina. The two of them are as tight as sisters. They will soon be separated, but will meet again years later. Boris Eitingon and his wife want to return home to Russia. As a white colonel, he knows that he'll be executed upon his return. Golov was only a corporal, lends him his paybook, and he takes the identity of Golov. Eitingon approaches Eitingon in his role as a diplomat to apply for visas to return home.
This is what's from the book. Okay. We are building a new world, Eitingon tells him. Actually, Anastasia says it's Eitingon in more Russian sounding. And we welcome all who want to take part. Have you engaged in counter-revolutionary activities here in Harbin? He could answer that honestly. No, Citizen Eitingon, I'm just a doorman at your hotel. Eitingon smiled. I thought I recognized your face, and it bothered me that I couldn't place you. Since we are neighbors, I'll expedite your case. Bring the papers back tomorrow. If there are no problems, I'll have your passports ready in a week. Talk to the clerk downstairs about the details. Arrange for the necessary photographs and fees. If you need money for the train tickets, the Soviet government will lend it to you. We welcome all men of goodwill, Citizen Golov. He's using Golov's papers. Eitingon stood to leave, and as his suit jacket fell open, he smelled himself. Two separate, familiar body odors that took him back to the battlefield, where those odors had been adulterated by smoke and blood, shit, and death. But today he smelled their essences clearly. If bottled as perfumes, he thought, the odors might be labeled despair, the odor of a man certain he is about to die, and relief, the odor of a man who has unexpectedly survived. After Eitingon left, Eitingon pulled a sheet of paper from his drawer and uncapped his fountain pen. He wrote for a few minutes and then dropped the paper in his outbox from which his aide would retrieve it. The sheet bore the heading, Instructions in the Matter of Colonel Eitingon. He was not fooled. You want me to read? This is not from the book. This is from Pat. You want me to read? Okay. When they arrive in Moscow, Eitingon is arrested and hauled before Vasily Zarubin, who's Zoya's father, who's now in Moscow. This is what is written in the book. And this is what Zarubin says to Eitingon. You have a choice, Zarubin tells him. You can refuse to cooperate with us. In that case, your guard will take you directly to the execution chamber, where you will be shot. Your wife and mother are also guilty of using forged papers, but that crime is not serious enough to merit death. They will be sent to a labor camp in Siberia for a 5-year term. Your wife might survive that, but your mother will not. Your daughter, Irina, is of course guilty of nothing, so the Soviet state will care for her in an orphanage until she is 18. Zarubin paused to let him imagine all that, and then continued. You have another choice, to work for the Soviet Union as a confidential agent. You will move to Constantinople, now called Istanbul, where you will be a doorman, again at the city's finest hotel, the Para Palace. Your family will stay here in Moscow, where they will be assigned lodging, and your wife will be given a job with pay sufficient to support your daughter and mother. In return for your work for us, you will receive a stipend of 30 rubles a month. I'll do what you ask, but I don't want your money. You'll do what we order, and you'll take the money too. Anakin nodded his agreement. He wondered whether Judas had tried to decline his 30 pieces of silver. You go.
3 years later, in order to save her family, Anna, Anakin's wife, is sleeping with her boss, who was also her interrogator, when she was arrested. When 9-year-old Irina confronts her mother after seeing his coat on her chair, Anna tells her this.
This is again from the book. Irina, I've told you many lies. I had to do so. You are too young to be able to live with the truth. But you're 9 now, and I won't lie again. Like me, you'll need to pretend to believe all the lies they tell you at school. Next year, you'll be a pioneer, and you must sing all their songs and march in all the parades. If you don't, they'll come after me. Your father's not a communist, and I'm not either, even if I pretend to be. I don't know where he is, and he's not allowed to tell us. He's working for them, because if he doesn't, they'll hurt us. And the man whose coat you saw is my boss. I didn't lie about that. He's also my interrogator when we were arrested. And he's not a bad man. He's why we have our apartment, why I have my job at the Lublanka, and why you are not in an orphanage. Don't ask too many questions about him. I promise you, I love only your father.
But that Anna has just put her life into the hands of a 9-year-old in a country that glorified the story of Pavel Morozov, a child hero martyred for informing his Trotskyist laboratory parents. His story was taught in Russian schools the way George Washington and the cherry tree was taught in America. Later, when she was 16, Irina and her mother are imprisoned in one of the Gulag labor camps. Irina sleeps with one of the guards to get extra food and indoor jobs for the two of them.
Again from the book. Irina says, she hoard for me and I hoard for her. Irina tells this to Zoya 50 years later. You think there are things you'll never do, but you're wrong. When you're hungry, when your mother is hungry, when you need protection, you'll do what you need to do, and you'll do it without much thought.
Meanwhile, Zoya is living a life of privilege as the daughter of a secret police general. When his family lives in government house, enormous luxury apartment living. But in some ways, it's even more dangerous to be a senior communist than an ordinary citizen. Over half the males in that building were executed or sent to labor camps for the next 15 years.
From Zoya, reminiscing years later. Oh. The Great Purges in 1936 began in 1936 when I was 16. This is from Zoya, when she's older, remembering. Zinoviev and Kamenev, two of Lenin's oldest comrades, were put on trial. They stood in open court and confessed that Trotsky had ordered them to organize Kirov's assassination and to kill Stalin as well. Then they named others as accomplices who were also arrested. The accomplices accused others during their interrogations, and so on. One confession could lead to a chain of hundreds of arrests. The less prominent simply disappeared, but the more important were put on public trial, and their confessions were even more alarming. They had spied for the Germans or Japanese or British, had poisoned water supplies, had wrecked trains. One after another, they stood in the dock showing no evidence of torture and confessed to obscene crimes, all linked to Stalin's exiled rival Trotsky, who had somehow kept a vast network of saboteurs and spies within the very heart of the party. Almost every night, the NKVD vans, called Black Marias, pulled up to the front of Government House, and boots echoed down the hallways. Would they pass by? Would they stop at our door? If the husband was arrested, but his wife was not arrested, she and the children were put out on the street with almost nothing. All their apartments, furnitures were the property of the state. Nearly every morning, I'd see women and children sitting on suitcases at the bus stop in front of Government House. It was my job to prepare the family breakfast, or so I was always the first awake. I just set the table when I heard a knock at the door, a timid knock, certainly not an NKVD knock, nothing to be afraid of. I opened it, and it was Vera, my best friend. Her eyes were red and her hair a mess. She'd been weeping. My parents were arrested. What was there to say? I embraced her. Oh, Vera, come in, I said. I'll pour tea. Even before I had Vera seated, Leonid was there in his dressing gown. Good morning to you, Vera. I'm sorry, but you can't be here. I must ask that you leave. Vera burst into tears. Leonid took her arm and firmly guided her toward the door. What are you doing? I shouted at him. Vera had often been in our apartment, and Leonid had always been friendly to her. He ignored me until he had her out the door, then turned to me and said, you need to understand, we are all on trial, especially those of us who live in this building, and we are judged by the choices we make in friends. If Vera's parents are guilty of crimes and you help Vera, that's evidence of your guilt. And if you're guilty, then I'm guilty. And if I'm guilty, you, your mother, your sister will find yourselves sitting on your suitcases at the bus stop. I shouted that he was monstrous, unfair, that Vera's parents were musicians, not spies. Leonard was unmovable. I was 16 years old. For the first time, I began to doubt. I still loved my country and believed in communism. I knew that something was wrong, although I couldn't have said what it was. I got up the nerve to ask Leonid whether all the people that were being arrested in our building were really spies and saboteurs. He thought for a while and he didn't answer directly. You have to understand, he said, it's not so much about the facts of individual guilt as it is about safeguarding the revolution. There is a saying, when you chop wood, chips fly. It may be that some of those arrested are only chips, but it's essential that we continue to chop wood. Now, you must never speak of what I just told you, and I didn't. I wasn't sure I understood what he said, but I did understand that silence was important.
The party lied even to itself. Every Soviet manager had a quota, and exceeding that quota was all important. If you ran a shoe factory with a quota of 100,000 pairs, and your plan didn't specify sizes, you could make 200,000 pairs of shoes no one wanted. It's very small shoes. Prosecutors had quotas too. Enormous number of people sent to slave labor camps or executed. Had a lot to do with prosecutors' quotas and exceeding their quotas. Henrik Yagoda was put in charge of construction of the White Sea Canal, which built as the equivalent of the Panama or Suez canals. It would shorten the distance, the naval routes, the sea route from Murmansk to Leningrad dramatically. Stalin gave Yagoda a fixed budget and a fixed timeline. And Yagoda knew the consequences if he failed. He built it using slave labor with some 20,000 deaths. But even then, he was forced to cheat. He built a toy canal, too narrow for any seagoing ship or naval cruisers. And he built the canal's locks using timber rather than concrete to be defended, which meant that they would rot in 3 years. He named the canal after Stalin himself, the I.V. Stalin White Sea, Baltic Sea Canal. By the time Stalin had figured out the scam, it was too late. couldn't execute Dakota, so he gave him a medal. Later promoted him to head of the secret police. In 1938, 5 years after the South Canal, 5 years after the canal's completion, Stalin was executed in Dakota. He wasn't rushing the purges as aggressively as Stalin wanted.
Thank you, ready for questions.
Yeah. Thank you again all for coming. I think we're ready for questions. Thank you.
Sounds like a fun time.
You didn't want to be there then, I don't think.
Well, there are things about it that certainly resonate in our lives here in this country.
Was the canal builder Secret Service head a real character?
Oh, yeah, Dakota. He was during the start of the purge trials, when Common Evans Nobia went on trial. He ran it then. But they just weren't getting the volume through he needed. So he was replaced with the Edgehoff, who wasn't completely insane. That's when the purges really started going.
How did you find out about all of this? How long did it take you to do the
Well, Yuri Slutsky's course certainly helped.
What?
The course at Cal by Yuri
Ah,
really helped me.
10 years of research.
I shouldn't say it quite as strong as I'm about to say it, but this is my version of Yuri's version of Soviet history.
Yuri wrote a wonderful book about Government House.
He combined,
Yeah,
he sort of told the whole story through this one apartment building where all the top people lived and all the interactions among them and all the raids every night.
Pat became sort of a groupie of Yuri's and went to all his classes. And then because he was always there, Yuri then invited him into his seminars. And so while this was all happening, this idea became.
But and then of course I had to find, I needed a character now and then. So I go look for a musician who was a piano teacher because I wanted one of my Irina was going to take piano lessons. And so of course there were two sisters or something. So I'd incorporate them. Or I needed an imprisoned jazz musician. And I found one. So there's always somebody you can drag in for an historical novel.
Wow. So I wonder if you think that lies in maybe hold a different weight in different cultures, and that you could say, well, you could even as a culture say, well, yeah, we know this is a lie, but we accept it for the greater good. Like we think that it's actually okay to collectively believe this lie because it's for the greater good.
We did some of that, but we did it when I was a boy. We were taught history in a way about Reconstruction or about Thanksgiving Day, what we did to the Indians in ways which were not historically accurate.
Well, that's sort of what Eitingon says to her. You know, it's for the revolution. It doesn't really matter whether those are lies. It is for the greater, what you're saying, for the greater good. And
If you want to keep the
did
revolution
he believe
going,
that? Probably not. But did he know that he was going to live that lie? Absolutely, because it kept him in power.
but it's a matter of degree. I mean, we never got to the point where we were executing half the political leaders because one man went insane.
Yet. Sorry.
it's another book.
I don't want to write that one.
You won't be around to write it.
No.
I'm afraid.
Health tech, shooting for 114. Thank you.
Is there somebody back there talking?
Yeah, I was joking. I want you to live longer. So same.
Thank you, but
No, he'll be dragged off.
That's okay, because then they did something good.
A lot of the story, which you couldn't get today, is sort of this juxtaposition of Zoya and Irina, and as they go through their lives. And
flipping back and forth.
actually, Pat has some very interesting ways of interweaving, and having that be a real sort of center piece of the novel. And
So what do you think the Russian family How did it survive during this period? That must be
Well,
part of
if you were out in the collective farms, you just got worked very hard. If you were in Ukraine, you probably starved to death. Because when they took the land, they intentionally starved people. They sold the grain to the West because they were trying to industrialize. They didn't care that something like 3 to 5 million people probably starved. Depends on where you were and how high up you were. You had a Moscow residence permit.
Now, there was a big lie that people in the United States did not know what was going on in Ukraine,
That's one of the lies.
right? I mean, they didn't know at all.
The New York
It's
Times-
industrialization and all
Yeah, I
that.
can't remember his name. The New York Times, because resident in Moscow, was very likely a Stalinist agent. You could see Durant, yes. And then you had also films like The Ambassador bought it all. U.S. Ambassador. What's his name? Do you know? Mission to Moscow was the film.
Joseph Davies? No.
Yeah, I think so.
Of course, you would remember. Right.
They were all they were in the State Department, not then.
Later.
He must have become legendary as an idiot.
I think the Hearst newspapers broke the story in America.
But a lot of people just, I mean, the communists in America were told, you have to accept this. Trotsky did all these things. The people speaking in the trials are speaking factually. Anybody who could believe that was just hiding behind something. Because
This question is maybe it's not topic, maybe it's not topic, but like at least in my kind of like reading of recent history, often when there's like civil war, there's like mass exodus to like other parts of the globe, like adjacent countries. And so I guess the question I have is like, was there a lot of like exodus out of Soviet Union at this point, or did it kind of like slowly kind of like build?
you may know that better than I do. I don't think it was very difficult to get a visa to get up. I didn't encourage anybody leaving.
The difference between Stalin's reign and what is happening right now in Russia, they wouldn't allow you to leave the country. Right now, you are free to go. Actually, it's pretty welcome. You're thinking otherwise, different from their official governmental line. Go leave. But with Stalin, it was extremely hard to leave. Yeah, they will not allow it.
I know one woman who left in 1953. She was 13 then. And right after Stalin died, it liberalized quickly for her. And she left at age 13 in 1950. See what the U.S. was like in 53. She came with her mother, who was also American. And she got here, and she was asked, what are you going to be when you grow up? She said, a good communist. Which probably didn't make her any points at the time.
Well, there were many intellectuals in the United States,
Who fought the war.
many Jewish, sort of radical Jews who all supported communism. Thought that was going to be the thing that's going to make the difference, get rid of fascists. I mean, that was a very strong movement here in a certain, when all this is going on.
And then when Stalin signed the pact with Germany, 39, then people started to go, what? But most people stuck with it.
People looking for an alternative.
By 1955, the circulation of the Daily Worker was 16,000, and 8,000 of those subscriptions were the U.S. government.
Sorry, in the very beginning of your talk, you told that story about making the trip yourself to Russia.
It was a business trip in 78, 2 weeks, and nothing worked the way it should. I got off the airplane, my luggage was lost. And I went to report it as lost. And I looked behind the desk, and there was a stack of suitcases, a mound of them up to the ceiling.
It's kind of like now, though.
And so you have to fill the form out, right? The form is an international form because I came international. It has to be filled out in English. So the woman behind the desk said, "What is your name?" So she could speak that much English anyway. Coffee. Spell, please. C. She didn't fill it. That wasn't her job. That was her assistant's job. And all her assistants would say, "Oh, all." We did the whole form like that. Address, passport, everything. So it took about an hour and a half to fill the form out. That's the way the whole country worked. Nothing worded. The way you would think it would. Yeah, there was and if you messed with anybody on their job.
I remember when you went to Siberia, which is not Russia, but sort of a similar culture, and you went expected to get on a plane, and the people said to you, "Well, we don't know that pilot, so you'll just have to wait."
Well, this was right after the wall fell, and we were supposed to get many places we didn't get, but it was no fuel, and then we don't know this pilot, and then, it's just everything was, but it was the same thing, Pat, people were still sitting at their desks at the apartment, but in their old jobs, but everyone was walking by. I mean, it was just nothing worked, but this was 90, whatever that was, 91. So, but you could see an extension of what it had.
There were queues. People wouldn't go out of the apartment with a shopping bag, just in case. On the way home, they'd see a line, and they'd get in it. But what is on sale? They didn't even know why they were. But there was a line, must be worth it. And there were just all sorts of strange things, which we don't think about here. But you can see how inefficient everything was. Any building, I was walking through one apartment building, which looked like it was pre-war, cracks in it, just a hell. It was 3 years old. Nothing, I can't explain how inefficient everything seemed.
I've heard, Joe, what you said about lies. I mean, we were just college kids, and I'd studied some Russian history and literature, but not much. Most of us were just there for cultural exchange, and people would come up to us, professors, and just start telling us things like they knew. I mean, it's that pain. So I'm sure some people went along, but the people we encountered were suffering, and we're just grateful to start. I mean, they were telling us these stories. Yeah, well, and we knew. I mean, we'd all just graduated from college, so only one of the 10 of us knew much, and he was the only one that really. And he was Jewish, and I was Jewish. So we spent most of our time just pretending we weren't Jewish. But that was another thing.
See but that was after the fall of communism. It was even worse before.
Yeah, no. That's what I'm saying. You could see the extension
Sure.
in of what you're talking about.
Any other questions? Patrick, yeah, thank you. Through the novel, I got an impression that Zoya was questioning the communism, the government she was working for, and it looks like she was losing the faith in it all along the story. Do we know for sure if she regretted any of her actions or?
I don't know. I made all that up, by the way.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make her. She was a child of privilege within the revolution. She was brought up in the best schools. She went to the best pioneer camps. And then she never had the courage. All her doubts were there. She never had the courage to do them. To do what Solzhynitsyn said. Stand up in the square and say, "This is all crap. Why are we doing this?" As Sakharov and other Solzhynitsyn and others. Yeah.
She was definitely not a dissident.
No,
she knew things but didn't speak them, and she lived with the benefits of what her life.
And Irina, her counterpart, of course, had a life of hell, separated from her family, sent to the camps. Her mother killed in the camp.
And yeah, I can't tell you because Pat won't let me, but how they find each other and how that gets that relationship does or does not get resolved is one of the best parts of the book. But I'm not allowed to say.
Yeah.
I kept saying, couldn't we put this in? He'd say, no, you can't tell that.
You can always rebel.
And Anyway, thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you so much for coming. It was great.
Thank you, Patrick. Absolutely. Pleasure
So
is
glad
all
we
mine.
found you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. Again, I think it's a wonderful book. It covers all the major, very important events, not only for the Soviet history, but history in general. And I understand that not everyone is interested in Soviet history today, but reading books like that makes me question a lot of things. I really want to do a little research and learn a little bit more about this of that. And thank you for keeping your audience curious.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm here to sign any books.
And I'm here to buy a book.
Yes, great. Pat's there to sign them.
Are you connected with the bookstore?
I'm managing this place.
Is this a special kind of bookstore? You have a lot of different collections?
Those are books in Slavic languages mostly, Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian.
Really?
There are books in Georgian as well. There's an English section. We're trying to enlarge the amount of books on history and culture, good translations, of course. So it started as a dissident literature place.
Really?
Yeah, here you can buy
Yeah, let me
uncensored
check with her how we do
literature. And across the street with Ruth was a place that's been supplied by the Soviet embassy. It was their officially allowed books. So the place.
Anastasia, how do they buy the books? They come to you? and
Yeah, absolutely. I can help you with that.
Sell
I'll
books.
sign them after you buy them.
Yeah, you can sign and then buy, or you can buy and then sign.
Don't sign it till you see it.
That's right.